But the idea I really liked was different cash flows for different people.
If that's going to be an issue for you because you've got sort of boom and bust cash flow, we could do you a deal where you pay for a year up front. That would be a smart way of doing it.
Paul Green's MSP Marketing Podcast.
Another Byte.
Hello, I'm Sophie Law and welcome to Another Byte. This is the YouTube show for MSPs who want to improve their marketing and grow their business. We do that by speaking to a brilliant panel of experts every week, but also, unfortunately, Paul Green, who sort of comes along as a package deal. Can't really shift him, unfortunately. Trying to work out how to do that. Anyway, Paul, hi.
Hi.
How are you?
Hi. Shall we tell lovely audience what we did this week?
I mean, that sounds creepy.
It does, actually.
All very much above board. We went to a coffee shop and we actually sat down together for the first time in a long time, didn't we?
It's getting on for 3 years, I think, since I last actually saw you in real life. Because we only live about 40 minutes, maybe 60 minutes apart.
Yeah, about an hour, yeah.
But it's enough for for my lawyer to observe where you are and to make sure that you don't breach the exclusion zone. This is wrong. Let's talk about business.
Let's talk about business. Let's talk specifically about the hell that is sales meetings, because on this week's MSP Marketing Edge podcast, you were quite enthusiastic about sales meetings and in fact about meeting clients in general. You couldn't get enough of it.
Yes, that's because I don't have to do it. It's because it's been 10 years since I've had to go out and do a sales meeting, and I have the lovely Ben who does all of the difficult work in our business. No, I mean, I think sales meetings are great, and it was our guest Brian who is joining us very shortly on this show. He said something awesome in one of his answers where he said that the average MSP, they will close 8 or 9 out of 10 of the appointments that they have. And so they think of themselves as just, I'm brilliant at sales, put me in front of more people and, I'll convert them at that rate. And the reality is that's not the case. The only reason they have such a high conversion rate is because the only people they're talking to are people who are ready to buy, who are contacting the MSP and are essentially the owner is an order taker who is going out to take the order. There's nothing wrong with that. That's how most small businesses operate. But the point that Brian was making, and I'm sure he'll clarify this later, was that as you start to ramp up your marketing and get better at lead generation and warming up prospects and moving them through the funnel, then you get better at, your conversion rate actually dips down a bit because you're having more conversations with more people. But overall, you win more clients. And the reason I love, to answer your question, the reason I love meetings with clients, meetings with prospects is because to me, even though I choose not to do it anymore because I don't enjoy it, back when I was the business, my very first business in 2005, to me, it was progress. Sitting in front of a prospect and talking about their business and how I could help them be better, that's the most exciting thing in the world. It's just that I got tired of that after 9 years of it.
Yeah, fair enough. And you said something quite interesting about skeptical, like sort of turning skeptical clients almost like a bit of a challenge and justifying your costs, which I guess comes back a bit to something we've talked about on the earlier podcast about, valuing your business properly and valuing your worth. But the idea I really liked was different cash flows for different people. So rather than kind of getting yourself into a big mess and sticking to one standard thing, sort of thinking, okay, well, if this is a business that's going to have a lot of money in 3 months' time, we can do a 3-month plan and then we can do a monthly plan for other people. And I thought, what a great idea. Yeah,
it's an idea to help you win a client that you may not necessarily have won. I mean, there's a couple of different variations of this. So what I suggested on the podcast is that if you're pitching to a company that has, let's say, a manufacturer. So let's say it's a manufacturer that makes things for other people. So they won't have a very smooth cash flow. In fact, their cash flow will be appalling. They will have this huge amount of cash leaving their bank account to buy in raw materials and to pay their staff to make their thing. And then having delivered their thing, their client will then take 30, 60, 90 days to pay them. This is one of the reasons why you do not want to be a manufacturer. It's horrendous. So it's very, very uneven cash flows. And it's why a lot of manufacturers will use something called factoring, which is where you essentially sell the debt to a bank and the bank gives you the money early on, but there's quite an expensive cost to that. So something like a manufacturer, there is a deal to be had there where you say, well, hey, look, It's $700 a month for all of the technology requirements that you've got. You can pay $700 a month, or if that's going to be an issue for you because you've got sort of boom and bust cash flow, we could do you a deal where you pay for a year up front and we give you a month's discount. Now that would be a smart way of doing it. So you say, look, for the whole year, it should be $8,400. You give us $7,700 now, and that's your whole year paid off in front. And in fact, you've paid for 11 months but received 12 months. And the benefit to the MSP of that is if you've got someone who is potentially going to be a bad payer, then it's better to get most of the money up front than hope that they pay down the line. The only thing with that is you just have to be very careful with the accounting of it. So there is, I'm not going to bore you, Sophie, because I know you don't. There's a level at which you don't do business, and I'm going to enter the world.
What are you talking about?
Well, I'm going to enter the world of GAAP, which is generally agreed accounting principles. Wake up.
Okay.
And generally agreed accounting principles say that if you take all the money in one go, but you deliver it over a period of time, then you have to account for it over a period of time. So what that means is, let's say you get $10,000 in today, let's say, where are we now, in May, and actually in your accounts, well, let's make it easy. Let's say it's $12,000 comes in today, $1,000 goes into May's accounts, $1,000 into June, $1,000 into July, August, etc. Even though you may have had the cash and spent the cash at the beginning of the year. And it's just something to talk to your accountant about, because there are various things. Well, it's not a good idea. It's the generally agreed accounting principle, Sophie. Accountants and CPAs everywhere have agreed this. I've often wondered with maybe you've never heard of GAAP, and you should do
I think that's something entirely different when you say GAAP.
It probably is, yes. Well, when it's generally agreed accounting principles, who generally agreed them? That's what I would like to know.
We're getting deep into philosophy. It's too early for this. It's too early. Let's talk about children's literature, because you made me think about my favourite ever children's book. I'm not sure whether it's a thing in the States, but Not Now Bernard by David McKee. Look it up. It's amazing. And the kid is about to get eaten by a monster. He keeps trying to tell his parents, and his parents keep saying, "Not now, Bernard." Spoiler alert. The monster eats him. It's a really bleak children's book, but it's my favourite. And I'm thinking about this because you were talking about the not now clients, the ones who are like, internet protection, blah, blah, viruses, whatever, later on. And there's a pretty fine line, I guess, between sort of terrifying them, as in there is a monster in your closet, and wanting to get the business off them, because you don't want them to suffer down the line, but you also want to make that sale.
Yeah, and it is a very, very fine line. The generally agreed marketing principle, the GAMP. I've just invented the GAMP. The GAMP sounds wrong, so we're never
very wrong indeed.
Ever going to use GAMP ever again. It's generally accepted that the people you're selling to, ordinary business owners and managers, they don't know what they don't know. So they don't understand that ransomware is actually not just real, but it's utterly terrifyingly real. And there is a fear-based selling. I'm sure Brian will confirm this when he comes on. Fear-based selling has a finite shelf life. But it's very hard to educate people. So there is a line. It's like, I'm trying to buy a physical security company. So as a side project, a company that sells burglar alarms, CCTV. And I've been talking to lots of the owners of these companies in my attempts to buy one. And they've all of them said the easiest sale in the world is where you have a street where someone is burglarized, or burgled as we call it here in the UK. And, once one house in that street is burgled, you've just got to knock on the doors and say, "Hey, did you hear about what happened at number 6? And they already have the fear, because it's like the burglar has come to their street. Mm-hmm. And you compare that to 3 streets away where no one's been burgled for a few years, it's a very hard sell. And I think finding that fine line of educating people, but without moving into fear-driven selling is it's very hard. And I think it's something that you have to develop your own sense of intuition for where am I with, I can't tell these people, they've got to reach this understanding themselves, but I guess I can help to educate them along the way.
Fantastic. Now, you have referred to a guest a couple of times. The guest on the MSP Marketing Edge podcast this week is joining us on Another Byte as well. It is Brian Gillette from Feel Good. And Brian, I have to apologise before we even begin, because you won't know this because you haven't heard the podcast yet, but Paul introduced you by playing the Gillette razor jingle that sings "The Best a Man Can Get." And I just want to apologise really.
Two things before you bring Brian in. Two things. Number one, that was producer James that made that creative decision.
Oh, sure it was.
And number two, Brian is like 12 and doesn't remember a 1990s advertising campaign, which I suspect was UK only.
Well, I think I need a 60-second rebuttal to say, of course I know the slogan, "The Best a Man Can Get." My last name is Gillette, okay? I choose to take it as an accomplishment of masculinity and not as all of the other real fun ways that I'm sure Paul intended it. Producer James, of course I know the slogan and I will take it as a compliment. And before we ask if there was any relation, I would not be doing podcasts to promote my business if I was related to the Gillette razor family. But I'm glad to be here.
Brilliant. So tell us a bit about what you do and about Feel Good. The ethos I really enjoyed hearing about on the podcast this week, and the fact that the name reflects how you are and how you operate, how you do business.
Yeah, for sure. So I have a company called the Feel Good MSP. I have a core philosophy that if business is not fun, you're actually not doing it correctly. And of course, that sales should truly be inherently a noble and cathartic experience, both for buyer and seller. And so what I do is kind of bring that philosophy into the managed services business, which desperately needs not only to feel better, because it can be a very bleak sort of disaster of the week industry for people who run an MSP, but really people who really need a sales philosophy that doesn't rely on fear, uncertainty, and doubt, because it can become really a pretty draining business to run or to grow if you don't have, I think, the proper mindset. So that's a little bit about what I do.
Nice. And there's loads of good advice if people want to jump on and listen to the MSP Marketing Edge podcast this week about things like getting consistent leads and what to do with them once you have them. But one idea that I thought was really neat was upcycling your leads or upcycling your clients and kind of splitting them out and getting more business from them, which I thought, that's great. Like, you don't even have to go out and look for them. They're already there.
The best warm lead is a referral from your existing client base, right? And a lot of people will sort of have polarizing opinions on, well, I only do word of mouth business, or some other people will kind of frown upon word of mouth business. Lead generators or marketers will say that if you only do word of mouth, it's because you just don't know how to do, the thing that I know how to do. But in my mind, if word of mouth business is the most reliable way of finding ideal clients, why don't we just lean into it and try to create systems which will increase the likelihood of getting word of mouth customers, right? Let's just get more of those, because dream clients know other dream clients. So yeah, upcycling a customer or using what's sometimes referred to as the stick and spread model, where you sell something that's very sticky and then you start spreading and you're selling more of a wider spread of your services to that customer once they become really dependent on you. And that's going to increase your stickiness to that client over time, making it much more difficult or much less likely for them to leave you when they purchase more of your services.
See, that leads me on to another brilliant English children's book called The Giant Jam Sandwich. Look that one up. It's about a horde of wasps. It's absolutely great. The other thing you were talking about, and anyone who's ever worked with Paul will feel this one, is that people are their own biggest problem. And the difference between figuring out when to drive a wedge, and I think you said guiding like a shepherd. I thought, oh, I like that. Like, how do you decide, which ones are too much of a problem and which ones with a little bit of your shepherd guiding could work well with Feel Good MSP?
Yeah, that is, I'm glad you brought that up. So, one of the things I like to do, especially if a client, if my intuition says that they might be difficult, or if I go in and you see that they have a lot of major problems, there's a reason they have those problems, right? And my first three questions, the core questions of my discovery process, are: what do you need? Why do you need it? And why don't you have it? Because if I ask, okay, you desperately need an IT company, sounds like you don't have a backup solution. It sounds like you're concerned about it. Now, how long have you been without a backup plan? 8 months. Can I ask why you still don't have a backup plan in place? Now, what they don't know is I'm actually figuring out if they know that they're the problem, because obviously they are, right? It's not for lack of trying that the BCDR industry didn't sell them something, right? There's a million places to get a backup plan, but they have decided they've been unable or unwilling to actually execute a solution. And it could be that they think, well, it's just not worth it, or my cash flow is not, or, well, we're a small shop. They're rationalizing, right? And so I'm going to ask them, why have you gone 8 months knowing that you've been in risk? Why has it been that long? And then I'm going to really figure out, what is this actual deal? What is the deal I'm looking at here? What's the problem I'm solving? Is the problem backup and disaster recovery? No, that's not a problem. I put in a box, it plugs into the internet, and everything fixes it, right? The problem here that I can help this person with is an internal one, right? That's the thing that really needs to be fixed, because if they can't overcome that internal issue, they're never going to get a good BCDR solution. They're going to get a cheap BCDR solution after they lose a bunch of stuff. Right. So I like to ask that question early on. And that's one of my ways of sort of assessing them. And then from there, as I mentioned, if they feel like they're going to be difficult, I like to actually polarize them in my first meeting. I will present a philosophy. I'll present my philosophy and give them a yes or no opportunity. Right. And if they're just not going to align with me, I really don't want to find out in a presentation call. I want to find out in a discovery call. So that's
a miniature psych profile.
Majorly, sales is so psychology. Sales is it's such a human endeavor, and I think rehumanizing sales is one of the things that makes it feel good.
I would say absolutely do not attempt a psych profile, Paul, because there is a lot buried underneath that silver surface.
The best a man can get.
So if you like the sound of that and you want to hear more from Brian Gillette, he is from Feel Good MSP, and he is on this week's Paul Green's MSP Marketing Edge podcast. You can find it anywhere you get your podcasts, and we will be delving into another one this time next week on Another Byte.
Paul Green's MSP Marketing Podcast.
Another Byte.